there. So, okay, we are with Erin Covey of the Cook Political Report with Amy Walter. We're continuing our stroll through Pennsylvania's four hot congressional races, and now we're going to focus on Pennsylvania 1, the Bucks County Center District in Southeast PA, where I grew up and cut my formative teeth in local politics. This represents long-term Republican incumbent Brian Fitzpatrick, who is being challenged by Bucks County Democratic Commissioner Bob Harvie. And so why don't you give us an overview of that race, Erin?
Yeah, so this is a district. It's mostly Bucks County and then has a little bit of Montgomery County as well. This is a seat that voted for Kamala Harris very narrowly in 2024. It has always been quite purple at the presidential level. Despite that, Congressman Fitzpatrick has won reelection by pretty convincing margins, really since he was first elected. I guess that was in 2016. Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah, and so even last cycle, he won re-election by about 13 points, despite the fact that Harris narrowly carried this district. So that just goes to show how much appeal he has among independent and even some Democratic-leaning voters. But I think Democrats are mounting a more serious challenge to him than they have in a while. Their nominee is Bob Harvie, like you said, a Bucks County commissioner. And unlike Fitzpatrick's previous opponents, Harvey has been on the ballot in most of this district,
Yeah, Dems
and
are
is
really
coming
touting
in.
the fact
Yeah.
Dems are really touting the fact that in their minds they got a top tier recruit because he's a county commissioner.
Yeah. So he's coming in, to your point about Stelton, with higher name ID than a first time candidate would have. And so that saves them a little bit of money. Though, of course, Fitzpatrick has a massive war chest. He has a lot of money stockpiled from over the years, and, that is going to make him a formidable incumbent. And then, of course, his record is different than most Republicans in Congress in that he can point to specific issues in which he has broken with the national party. Most recently, he did not vote for the final version of the Big Beautiful Bill. He was only one of two Republicans to do so. And, he had voted for the bill's initial passage in the House, but the final passage after the Senate amended it, he did not vote for. So he has that he can point to as showing a measure of independence. He went on a podcast recently and even expressed interest in the idea of becoming an independent. So it's clear that, he has a brand outside of the national party's brand, which is certainly unpopular in this sort of district. So we have this race rated likely Republican right now. I do think that Democrats have a better shot here than they have in a while. And I definitely see us moving this race to a more competitive category at some point. But it remains to be seen. And I think it's hard not to give Fitzpatrick the edge, even in a very tough year for Republicans.
So let me frame this. He's coming off a 13-point win in 2024. He has 12 or 13 times the cash on hand, at least according to the last reports, than Commissioner Harvey. Commissioner Harvey was pretty much the subject of a larger FBI investigation into some problems in Falls Township, where he was previously a supervisor. So I think the Fitzpatrick people will be able to kind of frame this as an FBI target versus a former FBI agent, which is what Fitzpatrick did back in the day.
Right.
And this race is also in the Philadelphia media market. So again, just as expensive as buying ads in the Lehigh Valley district. In 2024, Harris won the district with less than 50%. She got 49.7% of the vote. But Shapiro in 22 really cruised here. He had 59% of the vote. But interestingly, for the first time in a couple cycles, there are now more registered Republicans there than Democrats. 42.5% Republican, 40% Democrat, 17.5% independent. It's within a point of what the state's overall voter registration is now. And Bucks County voters, first district voters, they like people named Fitzpatrick. His late brother, who was a good friend of mine for many years, was the previous Republican member of Congress there in two separate stints. And Fitzpatrick is co-chair of the Problem Solvers Caucus, if that's the right title. He's always voted the most moderate Republican in the House. He just came out publicly and said he's going to lead the fight to kill what he referred to as the DOJ slush fund that was recently created or started. So I think he has a lot of moderate bona fides to play there. And I'm just curious how Bob Harvey, with I think $550,000 cash on hand, to Fitzpatrick's what, 7 million? How you scale that now?
Yeah, I don't know. It's going to be quite tough. And, I think in the past, Democrats have tried to paint Fitzpatrick as, a quote unquote extremist Republican, like they have with other House Republicans. And that has not been effective because Fitzpatrick has this pre existing brand in the district as a moderate. And has, quite a bit of goodwill built up among voters between him and his late brother. And so I think it's going to be tough, though I do think his closest race was in 2018, in a similar national environment. And
That
if
was the off year election in Trump 1. We're now in the off year election of Trump 2.
that's correct. And so if they're going to oust him, this would be the cycle to really try to do it. To your point, though, this is a really expensive media market. And I think that would make outside Democratic groups more reluctant to get involved, particularly if Harvey isn't raising a lot of money on his own. The more money that challengers raise, normally that is helps entice outside groups to come in, which may seem kind of counterintuitive because you may think, oh, why don't they come in to help the people who need it more? But typically, they want the candidates to prove themselves first, and so, we'll
Exactly.
see what Harvey is able to raise over the next couple of months, but I do think, like, when I talk to the National Party, Democrats are definitely taking this race more seriously than they have previously.
So his last two challengers was the same person, woman named Ashley Ehaz. So she was a repeat challenger 2022 and 2024. And before that, they had a really wealthy fellow who had lived most of the time in South Africa. I'm not making this up. So I think for Democrats, I would describe Pennsylvania 1 as their white whale. They're going to continue to try and convince us they can do it. They're going to continue, I think, kind of die on that beach politically. If there's anyone who was a political survivor in Pennsylvania, it's it's Brian Fitzpatrick. And I think when voters look at this, just like we were talking about Scott Perry in Pennsylvania 10, doing an ad that Perry voted against the spending bill, people would know that. That's part of his brand. So if you're the DCCC or some other Democratic group, all of the standard boilerplate language that you use in ads and press releases about every other Republican, you have to cut that out. You have to write fresh when you go up against Fitzpatrick. So I think the Democrats will lose part of the gear there because they can't take the standard template and run it. I mean, I am sure that the Fitzpatrick people hope they do that because Fitzpatrick has been successful in, you know, overcoming that. And I wonder if, well, to me, what I think about is if you're Team Harvey and you look at the fact that Shapiro got 59% of the vote there 4 years ago, Shapiro was up again this fall, that if you get 85% of Shapiro's vote, you win. So to me, that would be the entire game plan. How do we get 85% of what Shapiro got here last time? I don't think Shapiro's going to do as well there as last time, but that's who I would try and draft behind
Yeah.
because they've already done what you're trying to tell people that you are can do.
Yeah, and I mean, I think it's not clear to me how long Shapiro's coattails are. Certainly a big benefit to Democrats this cycle, the
Yeah,
fact that he's on the ballot. But in 2022, he was running against Doug Mastriano, who was, of course,
a
quite a
terrible candidate.
scandal
Yeah, yeah,
winning candidate, and so
just a
he
terrible
did
candidate. I'm
well
sorry.
in all of these competitive districts, and he did quite well in Pennsylvania 10 too. And despite that, Democrats who were running in these places didn't seem to benefit that much. Though this time around, again, they have a candidate who is running a stronger operation than the previous two cycles in this district and should be able to benefit from Shapiro's. Like, I would be shocked if Shapiro was not winning this district by double digits, given how he's performed here in the past. But we'll see.
So this was a fairly low level primary on the Democratic side. Harvey had a female challenger who was not an office holder, and I was underimpressed with how Harvey did. He gave up a little bit more than a third of the vote to his challenger who didn't run much of a campaign. I thought if he was, as great a candidate as people thought, he would have done better. Now, maybe they just decided not to spend any money because they did not care about that. I don't know. But if you're a Democrat like Bob Harvey and you're trying to raise money against Brian Fitzpatrick, juxtapose that with the raising money against Ryan Fitzpatrick or Rob Bresnahan, both first term folks. When you're raising money against Fitzpatrick, isn't the first thing someone says is Fitzpatrick always finds a way to win? Why should I send you 2 grand or 3 grand?
That is, and look, I mean, I think you have to make the national argument that if you want Democrats to have a majority in Congress, they're going to need to win some of these more, or if you want them to have a healthy majority in Congress, they're going to need to win some of these reach seats, which is how I would classify this race right now. And with all of this redistricting that's happened over the past several months, effectively Republicans have maybe like a 8 to 10 seat majority. Technically they have a 3-seat majority, but they have maps that are more favorable for them in a couple of places.
That's caused a lot of extra work for folks like you, right? Because
It
all of a sudden
has.
you have
Yeah.
dozens of districts that you have to reanalyze now,
Yeah,
and some of them became safer, but some of them became less safe because they were spreading out either the Republican vote more or the Democratic vote more, depending on which state. So I'm
that's
sure you've had
correct.
some late nights there at the Cook Political Report. And it's not like they're small states, right? It's Florida, Texas,
Yeah.
California. I mean, there's 125 seats right there alone.
No, it's a huge disruption for everyone, handicappers and voters alike. But yeah, I mean, I would say like if the election were held today, Democrats would need to win most of the races in toss up to get to 218 seats, which is what they need for a majority. If they want to have more than tiny majority that Republicans have had this session, they need to be winning some of these lean Republican and likely Republican seats as well. So if Harvey can convince donors that this is a seat that is winnable and will help Democrats pad their majority, then I think that is the argument that he has to make, is to be able to nationalize the race because Fitzpatrick does have this, strong local brand.
I think it's more than just a local brand, but I understand what you're saying. So
Certainly,
right
yeah.
now you right now have Pennsylvania 1 listed as rated as likely Republican, and you said that you're probably gonna move it more towards the Democratic side. In your system, everybody has their own system. What is the next step after likely Republican?
So after likely Republican, it's lean Republican,
And then it's toss up, is that
and
how
then it's
your
toss up.
ratings go? Okay.
That is
So you're
correct. And I
kinda
would
giving us
say,
a preview.
we don't know exactly how we're going to make these ratings, but if I'm looking at the likely Republican column right now, this is probably one of the ones that is more likely to shift into lean Republican over time. I think at this point, we have very little general election polling here. We have a little bit of polling that Harvey's campaign has put out, but we don't have any nonpartisan polling here yet. So I think once we have more data, we'll be able to assess, okay, how close is this race going to be? I would expect this to be a single digit race given the national environment, but I don't know if it's a mid to high single digit race or if it's close to tied. So we'll see.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, if someone said to me, "You have to tell me right now who the lone survivor would be in a Democratic wave year in Pennsylvania," I would point to Brian Fitzpatrick because he
Absolutely.
has he has a very good brand. He's seen as authentic inside that brand. He has a great family background. He has a great background as former FBI agent, and he's been critical of the Trump administration on a couple key things and also about the war in Ukraine. And that's an issue that helps bind Republicans together. But what I find ironic is he may be in, as you say, for his toughest reelection. But this is the first time since he got into office that he didn't face a Republican primary from somebody further to the right of him. So I kind of find that ironic that he gets his first free ride in the primary, but then everybody's saying, the general election is going to be, what it is. So we've been talking with Erin Covey of the Cook Political Report with Amy Walter, going through Pennsylvania's 4 hot congressional races. And as Erin has told us, no other state has 3 toss-ups like we do here in Pennsylvania 8, Pennsylvania 7, and Pennsylvania 10. Pennsylvania 1 is listed as likely Republican, but could move. Any parting thoughts, Erin, on Pennsylvania's hot congressional races?
No, I think we just about covered it. I mean, you also have Pennsylvania's 17th district, which we have rated solid
Okay.
Democrat this cycle. That's Chris Deluzio's seat in
Yeah.
the Pittsburgh suburbs. That's a seat that in a presidential cycle or in a midterm that's favorable for Republicans certainly could come online. But this cycle, we don't see that one as competitive. So it's not really on the board at all. But yes, Democrats have more offensive opportunities in Pennsylvania than they have in any other state, including places like California and Texas right now. So, I think it'll yet again be the center of the battleground, as it often is, both in presidential and midterm cycles.
As I tell folks, look, if you're bored with Pennsylvania politics, wait 6 months because it changes. So, anyway, Erin Covey, Cook Political Report with Amy Walter. Thanks you so much for your time and your expertise, and we'll talk to you again soon. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
Uh-huh.